Imagine this. A devoted mother of two suddenly disappears, leaving behind bizarre, chilling messages that didn't even sound like her. Within days, the search for Katie Kenyon turned into a nightmare of deceit, obsession, and one of the most cold-blooded murders Britain has ever seen. This is not just a story. It's a tale of betrayal, horror, and pure evil hiding in plain sight. This might be the most shocking, heartbreaking, and unforgettable video you'll ever watch. Stay with us, because what happened to Katie will leave you stunned. A mother of two vanished under disturbing circumstances, leaving behind a series of cryptic messages that unsettled her family. Detectives jumped on the case immediately, but what began as a puzzling disappearance would unravel into one of the most shocking investigations the country had seen. Katie Kenyon was born in 1983 in the quiet town of Burnley, England. She grew up surrounded by the love of two sisters, one older and one younger, with whom she shared an unbreakable bond. From childhood, Katie's defining traits were clear: kindness, generosity, and a willingness to drop everything to help someone else. As she grew older, Katie married and became the mother of two children, a boy and a girl. But when her marriage collapsed, she was left to raise them largely on her own. Their father still appeared in their lives occasionally, but the daily responsibilities rested on Katie's shoulders. Life wasn't easy. She worked as a social care worker, her modest paycheck barely stretching far enough to cover necessities. Yet no matter how hard things got, Katie never wavered in her devotion to her children. She fought every day to make sure they had what they needed. On the morning of April 2nd, 2022, Katie, then 33 years old, followed her familiar routine. She got her kids ready for school, sent them off, and began her day. But just a few hours later, around midday, something happened that would throw her family into panic. Her mother received a text message from Katie, one that didn't sound like her at all. The message said she needed time away, that she was going to clear her head, and that she'd be gone for a while. Alarm bells rang instantly. Her mother dialed Katie's number, desperate to hear her voice, but the call went straight to voicemail. That was the moment fear set in. Katie wasn't just taking time for herself. Something was terribly wrong. Katie's mother knew her daughter had battled anxiety for years, worn down by the constant stress of raising two children on her own. But the idea that she would simply walk away from everything, especially her kids, made no sense. Alarmed, she reached out to Katie's sisters. None of them believed the message either. Together, they hurried to Katie's house. Her car was gone, but when they let themselves inside with a spare key, they found something unsettling. Almost all of Katie's belongings were still there. Clothes, personal items, everything she used day to day, untouched. The only things missing were her phone and handbag. The theory that she had simply left voluntarily didn't fit. Something felt deeply wrong. When Katie's children returned home from school, the situation grew even stranger. They told their grandmother and aunts that they too had received unusual messages from their mother. In the texts, Katie claimed she needed to get help to become a better mother and instructed them to contact their father so he could care for them while she was away. To the family, the messages rang hollow. The tone was wrong, flat, detached, nothing like Katie's voice. And then came a glaring detail that raised even more suspicion. In both texts, the word while was misspelled. Katie, meticulous with her writing, would never have made that mistake. Her son then shared something else that tightened the knot of dread. A man named Andrew, Katie's ex and her partner of several years, had contacted him on social media. According to the message, Katie had checked herself into a clinic and asked Andrew to take care of her dog until she returned. To the family, the pieces weren't adding up. The more they looked, the clearer it became. These messages weren't Katie's at all. Someone else was writing them. Are you ready to dive into some of the most terrifying cases in the world? Don't miss a single detail. Oh, and make sure to subscribe to my channel. Your support gives me the motivation to create even better content in the future. We're just a few subscribers away from reaching our first 500, so help me hit that milestone. Now let's get back to this chilling journey into the world of crime. To Katie's mother and sisters, the entire situation felt wrong. Yes, they knew she had been involved with Andy for years, but it was never a stable relationship. Their time together had been marked by constant breakups and reconciliations. As far as the family knew, they weren't even together anymore. So why would Katie confide in him about her supposed plans, yet say nothing to her own children or her mother? Even stranger, the texts Katie's kids received had also mentioned Andy. She had written that if their father couldn't take care of them, Andy would step in. To the family, it was a bizarre suggestion. One of Katie's sisters managed to get Andy's number and called him directly. He claimed he hadn't seen Katie since the day before, explaining that he'd been at work all morning. According to him, around 2 p.m., Katie had texted saying she was going to drop her car at his house and would leave the keys and her bank card in his mailbox. Andy said Katie owed him a substantial amount of money, about £6,000, for covering her past anxiety treatment. Leaving the car and card behind, he explained, was her way of settling the debt. In a follow-up message, Katie allegedly told him she was heading back to a clinic because her anxiety had become unbearable. Andy insisted nothing about the texts seemed strange to him at the time, but Katie's sister wasn't convinced. The story didn't sit right, and her instincts told her Andy knew more than he was admitting. So she and her boyfriend decided to drive over to his house themselves. When they arrived, her suspicions deepened immediately. Parked outside was Katie's car. Through the window, she could see her sister's purse and other personal belongings still inside. Items no one would leave behind if they truly planned to disappear. To Katie's family, the pieces were beginning to point in one direction, and it wasn't good. Katie's sister decided to confront Andy directly. She knocked on his door, desperate for answers, but he refused to let her in. Instead, he told them to leave. His cold indifference didn't sit right. Here was a woman missing, and yet Andy showed no urgency, no concern. Her boyfriend's patience snapped. He threatened to kick the door down if Andy didn't open it. But instead of cooperating, Andy called the police. When officers arrived, they spoke first with Katie's sister. She explained everything, the unsettling messages, the family's conviction that Katie hadn't written them, and their fears that something was terribly wrong. She pointed out Katie's car, still sitting outside Andy's house, her belongings clearly visible inside. Then the police turned to Andy. He repeated the same story he'd already given, that he was at work when Katie texted him about dropping off her car, keys, and bank card, and that she had said she was going to check into a clinic. To his credit, Andy even allowed police to search his house and his van. Nothing incriminating was found. With no immediate evidence of foul play, the officers left, but not without opening a formal missing persons case. To rule out Andy's version of events, police began calling clinics across the region, hoping Katie had truly checked herself in. One by one, each facility confirmed the same thing. Katie had never been there. By the following morning, detectives shifted focus to reconstructing Katie's last known movements. The obvious starting point was Andy's property. After all, That's where her car had been abandoned. Investigators canvassed the area and soon learned of a nearby surveillance camera. They pulled the footage, knowing it might hold the first real clue in unraveling Katie's disappearance. On April 21st, the day before Katie vanished, surveillance cameras captured her pulling up to Andy's house. The footage showed her getting into his van, sharing a kiss with him, smiling. Nothing about the exchange seemed unusual, nothing that would hint at what was to come. The next morning told a very different story. At 9:20 a.m., the same day Andy claimed he had been at work when Katie supposedly dropped off her car, cameras told the truth. The footage showed Katie arriving at his house once again, stepping out of her car and climbing into the passenger seat of Andy's van. Behind the wheel was Andy himself. Detectives began tracing the van's movements through traffic cameras. First, it was spotted at a McDonald's. Then, it turned onto the highway and kept going. Eventually, the trail led to a rural back road cutting into a heavily wooded area. That was the last camera to catch the van for nearly an hour. When it finally reappeared, the picture had changed. The van was headed back the same way it came, but this time, only one person was inside. Andy was driving alone. A grim narrative was beginning to take shape. Investigators now had reason to believe Andy had driven Katie into the woods, and when he returned, she was no longer with him. After combing through surveillance footage, investigators turned to Katie's phone records. Location data revealed a telling trail. Early that morning, her phone disconnected from the tower near her house, only to reconnect minutes later near Andy's home. From there, the digital path mirrored the van's journey perfectly, first toward McDonald's, then out onto the highway, and finally into the rural back roads. But that's where the data and reality began to diverge. According to the records, Katie's phone was still inside the van on the return trip to Andy's house. Yet the cameras showed only one occupant. Katie was no longer there. Then came the final blow to Andy's story. Investigators compared the timing of those unsettling texts Katie's mother and children had received. By then, Andy was already back home, alone. Location data confirmed the messages were sent from his house, not by Katie on the road. With the evidence dismantling Andy's version of events, detectives returned to his property. The moment they stepped inside, suspicion deepened. The house was stiflingly hot. Despite the mild weather outside, Andy had lit the wood-burning stove. Detectives immediately wondered if he had been trying to destroy something. By the time they checked, the stove was nothing but ash. But the damage was already done. Enough inconsistencies and red flags had surfaced. Police placed Andy under arrest and brought him in for questioning. What struck detectives most was Andy's demeanor. He didn't look rattled or nervous. On the contrary, he appeared calm, almost too calm, as he repeated the same story, that Katie had probably checked herself into a clinic to manage her anxiety. When investigators pressed harder, his composure cracked. He abruptly shut down and refused to answer another question without a lawyer. The interview ended with no progress. With Andy stonewalling, detectives shifted focus to the forest, where Katie's phone had last pinged before the van reappeared with Andy alone. It was a daunting task, roughly 25 miles of dense, unforgiving terrain. Still, police launched one of the largest search operations the town had ever seen. Dozens of officers were deployed. Backup units from neighboring jurisdictions arrived. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging swept the skies. Drones scouted from above, and specialized teams scoured the ground. Divers searched waterways while volunteers combed trails and underbrush. The scale of the operation was massive, but so was the search area. Days into the effort, a crucial break came. A witness reported seeing Andy's van parked in a specific section of the forest. That tip changed everything. For the first time, investigators had a focal point. The massive search grid was narrowed to a 5-mile radius. As teams closed in on the area, detectives decided it was time to bring Andy back in for another round of questioning. This time, they hoped the mounting pressure would finally crack him. This time, detectives confronted Andy with the evidence: the surveillance footage, the phone records, and the contradictions in his story. Faced with proof he couldn't deny, Andy finally changed his account. He admitted that he and Katie had gone into the woods together. But what he said next left investigators stunned. According to Andy, the trip was nothing sinister at all. It was a picnic. He explained that Katie had a personal ritual. She often wrote her thoughts in a journal and then burned the pages as a way of releasing her burdens. He insisted that morning was no different. They ate together, started a small fire, and she burned a few pages. Then, he claimed, he drove home. As for Katie's fate after that, Andy shrugged. He said he had no idea what became of her. Detectives didn't believe him for a second, but the problem was clear. Despite the inconsistencies, they still had no hard evidence tying Andy to Katie's disappearance. The search of the forest had yielded nothing. No body, no belongings, no trace at all. With the trail going cold, investigators began digging deeper into Katie's relationship with Andy himself. Her family told them Katie had met him 3 years earlier. On the surface, he seemed steady enough, a construction worker divorced with 2 children of his own. At first glance, he came across as reliable and grounded, but those closest to Katie soon noticed troubling signs. Andy had a controlling streak. He dictated how she should behave, how she should speak, even how she should think. Behind the facade of stability, something darker was emerging. Andy often weaponized Katie's anxiety, using it as a way to dismiss or belittle her whenever she said or did something he didn't like. Instead of helping, his constant pressure only deepened her struggles. At one point, Andy offered to cover the cost of her treatment, and Katie agreed. But the gesture didn't heal the fractures between them. The fights grew more frequent, more heated, and eventually the relationship collapsed. For Katie, the breakup was a relief, a chance to breathe again. But for Andy, it was a rejection he refused to accept. Not long after they split, Katie found her car tires slashed. She was certain Andy was responsible, though she never went to the police. Then came the financial blow. A few months before she went missing, Katie received a court letter ordering her to pay Andy £4,000, the amount he had spent on her treatment. She was already struggling to make ends meet for herself and her children. The debt was crushing. Late fees soon snowballed, and the amount climbed to £6,000. Katie's anxiety spiraled. She feared losing her home, the only secure place her children had. But more than the debt, she feared Andy himself. In a message to her mother, Katie confided that she was scared of him and truly believed he might hurt her. To her sister, she said something even more haunting. "If anything ever happens to me, look at Andy first." And yet, just a month before she vanished, Andy reached out to her again. Andy reached out with what seemed like a change of heart. He told Katie he regretted ever dragging her into court. He promised to drop the case, offered to cover the mounting fees, and apologized for his anger. He told her he wanted to change. Against the backdrop of years of turmoil, Katie forgave him. Against her better judgment, they reconciled. But detectives later uncovered something far darker. Just one day after making those promises, Andy phoned the debt collectors, not to ease her burden, but to make it worse. He instructed them to go harder on Katie, to increase the pressure. Investigators believed this was deliberate, a calculated effort to trap her further, to erode her independence and force her deeper under his control. Katie, of course, had no idea. Andy continued to reassure her, insisting he was working on canceling the whole thing. Weeks later, he called the collectors again, this time claiming Katie had shown up at his house and attacked him. He pushed them to escalate collection efforts, urging them to move against her as quickly as possible. When collectors contacted Katie, she was frantic, but Andy brushed it off, dismissing her panic, telling her she was overreacting. He claimed the court process was complicated, that it would take time, and that he was still fighting for her. Then, just as before, he turned the narrative back on her, telling her something was wrong with her, that she needed help. The pattern was clear: manipulation layered on deception, each move tightening his grip. Katie Kenyon's story is a heartbreaking reminder that danger can hide behind a familiar face. She trusted someone she once loved, and that trust cost her life. Her case shows us that control, manipulation, and abuse in relationships are red flags we can never ignore. In real life, it's not always easy to spot the warning signs, but if something feels off, if someone tries to control your choices or isolate you, take it seriously. Speak up, reach out for help, and look out for the people around you. Katie's tragedy is one of the darkest and most painful cases we've ever covered, but if her story can help even one person recognize the signs and protect themselves, then her memory can inspire change. Stay safe, stay aware, and never forget Katie. Be sure to let us know what you think of the story in the comments below. And if you like this video, smash the like button and don't forget to subscribe. A playlist is going to pop up right now with more videos you'll love. See you guys next time.